whenever you watch this. It'll actually be Monday morning when this is uploaded, but it is now Sunday evening. The first thing I want to say is that if you have any issues watching the video lecture or something wrong with the CNU portal and you haven't contacted me, now is the time to do that. The first lecture is still open until the end of the week, and you have to cover this one as well. Nobody has contacted me from Conversation 2 so far, so I'm assuming everything is okay, and until somebody does, I will just assume that everything's working perfectly. So please sort it out this week if there is any issue. And of course, today we are starting our textbook, Takeaway English 3, the purple one. There are 4 books, so be careful you get the right one, and make sure you get the student book as well. So the topic for today is world languages. And I want to expand. As usual, I will probably give some examples and expand on what the topic is going to be for your assignment. So just to be clear, there's certain things that are in the textbook, and you have to listen carefully to what exactly I want you to do for your homework, because it might differ somewhat from what's in the textbook. So let's talk about the patterns and the grammar that they try to teach you in this chapter first. I think that's one way to tackle each week, is to talk about how to improve your language structure and how to improve your grammar skills, sort of passively. I'm not a grammar teacher and I'm not a linguistics professor, but you know, the grasp I have of grammar is largely automatic because I'm a native speaker, and I don't like grammar, just like many people. I don't like studying it, but I don't like grammar mistakes either. So the thing that we're going to focus on today is our adjectives and just some simple differences in speech about using certain tenses versus others. We are going to keep the grammar lessons very simple, as I said, because that's not really the purpose of this course. It's really what we're trying to do here is to practice patterns of speech that make you more comfortable so that you can express yourself. Not only listen to me or to other people who are using English and understand them, but that you can also, when it's your turn, communicate the ideas that you want to. So on page 5, the grammar distinction here is between the simple present and the present continuous. This is the most basic thing, perhaps, in the verb lessons that will follow this semester. Really, all you have to do is distinguish between whether something is a regular event, which, or a statement, a general statement, in which case you would use the simple present. For example, I speak English, right? Or I run every day, or I love to run. These are all examples of talking in the present tense, where something is either happening every day or over a period, like once a week or something like that, and or it's something that's kind of always in a certain state, right? So I love soccer. That's not something that changes, it's something that's constant. So that's where you use the present simple. I think sometimes the problem in English for people learning the grammar is that the present continuous kind of seems like a weird tense. It always did to me when I studied French, and then I came back to English and I looked at I didn't really study English grammar that much, like I said. So when I started using English and just using the tenses and writing the tenses automatically, I noticed how easy it was for me to do it, but how sometimes it seemed like I shouldn't know which tense to use, but I just did it automatically out of memory. So basically the present continuous is something that is happening right now. The case where I often find students making the wrong choice is when, for example, you're looking at a picture and you're describing a picture, or a scene, you know, from something that you've looked at on a screen. And in that case, a native speaker would normally use the present continuous, almost as if you were actually in the picture or in the screen. and something was happening at the moment, right? So even if nothing's continuous, like you're looking at a painting and in the painting someone is doing something, that I guess you have to wrap your head around the fact that imagine that you're in the painting and then the person is running, or the person is jumping over the fence in the picture, or the dogs are playing cards. You don't say the dogs play cards in the painting. You say the dogs are playing cards in the painting. Okay? So that could get confusing. But generally, if you see something happening right now, that's the case where you switch from using the simple present to present continuous. So if you're talking about anything that's ongoing, something continuous, then that's when you add the ing to the base form of the verb. So for example, I am speaking English now. I am teaching class. I am recording myself with my camera. Okay? So it's a pretty simple distinction, but there are some cases where it gets a little bit confusing. Like I said, for example, when you're describing something that's still and not moving, but you would imagine that you're describing it as if something is moving or doing something. Now, next, another good point in this chapter is the difference between say and tell. We'll talk about some other examples of words that if you translate them into Korean, that it's not the way that you use it in Korean. And I have no idea how those words are used in other languages, if you're using Chinese or you're using Uzbek or Mongolian or any number of Russian or any number of other languages. Even Spanish, I wouldn't know. Even though I've heard those words before, I don't know how to translate those words exactly. So in English, the difference between say and tell is quite simple. You would say, okay, I said something, right? But when you're talking to a person, you would say tell. I told my mother, right? I'm using the past tense accidentally there. So I should say, I say something, or I tell something, someone something. I almost made a mistake there. I tell someone something. So you can say, I will tell her about the homework, right? I will say we have homework. But you don't say, I say her homework. You can actually add another word in there and say, I will say to her, but it still sounds awkward, right? That's where the case where you need to use the word tell. So to tell someone is the way it works. You're talking to a person, then you use tell. And if you're just saying anything, something, anything, but it's not directed towards a person, then you use the word say. And that will usually steer you right. So just follow that guideline and there won't be as many mistakes. Okay, so those are the major grammar points, teaching points for this week. Keep them in mind. Those things will be valuable throughout those points I just made about the verbs and the difference between say and tell. Those are going to be valuable lessons for you to keep in mind, no matter what topic we discuss, not just this one. The topic this week is about world languages, and the assignment that I would like you to do is going to be, I want you to choose a language, and I want you to decide, you just want to choose a language that's interesting, and I want you to tell me why. I want you to describe the reasons why this language is interesting. It doesn't have to be the best language. It can be the, no, I shouldn't say worst, but it can be the most difficult language. If you choose the language that's most difficult, just tell me why it's so difficult and why you're interested in this language. You want to study it, or you wonder how people, acquire the skills because there's so many characters, or the pronunciation is so difficult to you. Describe the language and give your reasons for why you're talking about it. Okay? Now, we're going to talk about this not in the language that you choose. So if you choose German, you're not going to write in German. You're going to write in English, of course. So I'm going to allow you also, which I haven't in the past, but it occurred to me that I might as well allow you to also talk about different versions of English. About 2 years ago, I guess, I did a conference. I spoke at a conference. I shouldn't say I did a conference. I spoke at a conference about world English is. Specifically, I talked about Canadian English and how it fits into the what you would call, I guess, a mosaic of different types of English. There's even something in Korea called Konglish, right? We'll talk about that later because I want to focus on some different things today. But Konglish comes up a lot in our teaching environment in English because some things that are created or borrowed into English that is circulated in Korea don't exist in other places. There are lots of examples of this. Eye shopping is one of them. It's perfectly logical to say I'm shopping using my eyes. But when I first came here and somebody said I'm going eye shopping, I couldn't help but imagine that they were actually shopping for eyes. Because in some cases we say house shopping, right? Or clothing shopping or grocery shopping. Those are the normal ways of constructing the meaning of those words. Not to say eye shopping. But then I realized we say window shopping instead. And we're not shopping for windows. We're just looking through the windows. So really there's no difference other than the fact that you're not used to the expression. In that case, sometimes the constructions are a little bit different. So what I want to say now is that you can discuss Singlish from Singapore or Konglish from Korea. You can talk about Australian English or Canadian English or British English. But you're going to have to do a little bit of research here to find out exactly what that is. Unless you've been watching BBC a lot and there are students that try to imitate a British accent because that's what they like. I had a student a few years ago who really admired the British accent, and she did her best to imitate Emma Watson. That's the Hermione actress from Harry Potter, among other things. She's a very good actress, I think, in general. But she ended up trying to imitate her, and I have to say she did a pretty good job of it. Probably better than my imitation of a British accent. But you have to be careful, when you affect different accents, how it comes across. So that being said, it's your choice what type of English accent you want to develop if you choose to do that. Certainly in this class, be aware that having a Korean accent or a Chinese accent or a Belgian accent, I shouldn't say European accent, what is that? You have a certain accent from a certain part of England or Spain or France or Germany or the United States even, that's not a problem. When you deviate significantly from standard types of pronunciation though, and the sound is so similar to another sound in English that it doesn't really, it takes away from your ability to communicate, then of course your pronunciation score on a test or an interview or a presentation is going to go down. But having an accent itself sometimes can be an advantage. You can just see all the different types of movies and all the different roles. They love to have people use accents in different roles because it helps people understand where that person's from, and it gives them a certain perception of their character. Even, people try to learn accents, right? Brad Pitt is somebody who has done many different accents, for example, in his movies. And some of them are good or some of them are not. But being able to do an accent is certainly a great skill for an actor to have, because that is an asset, not a demerit. It's a merit. It's an advantage for somebody to have an accent. So you don't need to be concerned that, you have a Korean accent and you don't sound like you're from New York or California or somewhere else. You don't have to be concerned about that. But being able to have other people understand you is, of course, a concern. So it's up to you. You can choose any type of English, a world English, I guess I would call it, or you can choose a completely different language, and then you can discuss that. When you're discussing the language, one of the most important things is going to be why you chose it. Like I said, you need to give me these reasons if you want to get full credit for your assignments, okay? So this is due next week. You have 1 week to get this done. And you email it to me using your student number, as I explained. I want your student number, I want your name, and I want you to write the name of your topic, whatever language that is, whatever title you choose. And then send me the email with a file attached, please. It's much easier for me to use Word. The reason is because I don't even have to actually download the file. I can use my document viewer. If you send it to me in Hangul, actually you have to download the file and open the file and then print it or read it from within that software. But if you send me a Microsoft Word document, Google will just let me look at your document without actually downloading it. And I can do that if I need to, but not necessarily. So attach it as a document. You can even write it in Hangul, just save it as a document file. Please do that for me. I would appreciate it. So when you're done this, you have to send it by email. Just make sure the file name includes your student number, the subject line includes your student number, and everything will be fine. That's due by next Monday, okay? When you're describing the language, you have to make choices about why you chose the language. So one way to do that is to be descriptive. So on page 4, there's a whole bunch of different adverbs and adjectives you could use. So first of all, adverbs, you're going to describe how the language sounds when somebody speaks or somebody says, tells, uses the language. So speaking clearly, loudly, naturally, quickly, normally, fluently, easily, and slowly are all descriptions of the way it sounds, right, when somebody speaks. This has sometimes more to do with the person than to do with the language, but there's all kinds of words that you could use to describe a language. And you don't have to be politically correct here. I don't care if you say a language is guttural, which means kind of low and hard to hear clearly. It doesn't really matter to me if you say something is romantic sounding or sweet or scary or dangerous. You can tell me what you think. Now, it's not for me to judge whether you're right or wrong. It's just sometimes a perception people have. It also depends on who uses the language. So if you're watching a whole bunch of movies and every Hollywood movie has a German accent, the evil character who's the evil mastermind, the dangerous mafia boss, or the terrorist, or the Nazi, or the international spy, the bad character in the movie ends up being a person with a German accent or a Russian accent or perhaps an Italian accent, who knows. You probably are going to, if you grow up hearing that sound coming from a certain type of person, you're going to have the wrong idea about what it sounds like when somebody uses the language, because you're associating bad characters with that language. If you've been to Germany or you've been to Russia or Italy, you get a totally different sense, because there's all different types of people who use the language. You might hear an Italian opera and think Italian was the most beautiful language ever created. I don't know. Same thing. You might go to Russia and you might watch a ballet, or you might watch a performance, or you might hear somebody read Dostoevsky or Tolstoy or something like that, and think that Russian language is perfectly made for literature and or poetry or for music. That's the thing that might change your opinion about a language very easily. So like I said, it's really a good idea to do some research and see fundamentally how the language works. We are here stuck in English, using English. I shouldn't say stuck, but since that's the only language I can profess in, that's the one we're going to use, and this is what we have to work with. So English is a very interesting language unto itself. Let me just say, one of the worst things about English is probably the spelling, but that's sort of the flip side of one of its good points, if you want to look at it that way. it has a very rich, wide vocabulary that is kind of derived from four language groups. We have a huge amount of vocabulary from Greek and Latin, because Greek is used mostly for classification of scientific things. Latin is used for, Latin was the language of the Roman Empire, so law and politics. A lot of language is derived from that. Religious language comes through Latin as well. And then, of course, we have the French influence because some people from northern France, from the Normans, actually invaded and took over England, and the upper class used French for several hundred years. And so, although English persevered, it absorbed this Greek vocabulary, Latin, and then French vocabulary. And I talk about this in my topics class in more detail, but that's basically what it is. But the basic structure of the language is Germanic, right? So we have a Germanic language with a whole bunch of Romance vocabulary with a bunch of Greek technical terms thrown in there, and you have English, which makes English a very intimidating language to learn because it's huge. It's got the biggest vocabulary in the world because of all the borrowing it's done. And we have words from all different kinds of languages, not just those three that have entered into English. So that's tough. The spelling is difficult. The vocabulary is enormous. But when it comes to description, maybe English is the most descriptive language in the world because it has multiple words with very specific meanings for the same thing. So once you get to the level where you know all the basic words and you can control and command them comfortably, you're fluent, right? But you can go beyond that and you can become sort of an expert writer or an expert speaker who uses those extra levels of language on top or below. It doesn't have to be on top, but we have all these different options when we're speaking. That can be hard for listening too. So I don't know if you want to say, as a non-native speaker, which I think all of you are, if you're coming from whatever language you're coming from, one of your major criticisms might be, hey, there's too many words to learn here. And when I meet a native speaker that's using words that are not in common parlance, I can't understand what they say. That's just something that's part of the English language that makes it difficult. Other languages have advantages and disadvantages too. I'll just choose Chinese because Chinese is sort of notorious for two things. The intonations of the sounds, like words that look similar, but the way you pronounce them is very subtly different in terms of how you say the tone. How do you use the tone? And I can't give you examples. I can just tell you that I do it wrong. And any Chinese person who has tried to teach me how to say something starts shaking their head halfway through the word that I say. So I do know some Chinese words, but I'm not going to butcher them for you because I have some Chinese students and they'll probably just be like, Professor, please take some Chinese classes before you do that on YouTube. The other thing about Chinese is, besides the pronunciation, is the fact they have their characters are more complicated, and there's a lot of them. There's simplified Chinese, but I mean, it's a very old language, much older than English, and the characters are beautiful. So if you want to do calligraphy, maybe Chinese is the coolest language in the world to learn because of the amount of detail, almost like drawing a picture and stylizing that is something that it's almost like art. It's written art as much as it is just a composition of sounds, of forms representing sounds. So there is an advantage and a disadvantage to every language that you look at. It's up to you to decide which one you want to talk about and to analyze it a little bit and tell me the reasons why you chose that language. That's the first assignment. So like I said, follow the email instructions. I expect half a page single-spaced or a full page double-spaced. Something like 250 words is what I would like you to do. If you do it and complete it on time, I will give you credit for it 100%. If it's not done well, then you get half. And if you don't do it at all, of course, then you get nothing. Okay? So this is our first assignment. Like I said, we're going to do this 5 times for the first 5 chapters. So please write about a world English, which is a dialect of English from a certain place that you learn about or know about, or choose a world language that you're interested in. Write it over this week and send it to me by next Monday. And that is class number 2 in the books. Thank you for listening. Be careful of the typhoon. And as always, the coronavirus is ongoing. So be careful. Wash your hands. Mask. Don't go to gigantic groups of people, even if people invite you, because that's not a wise idea. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.